the reason I like gamification is not because of the fun that it's meant to deliver. I think fun is a concept that we all, it's different for every person. The reason I like gamification is because it is a great vehicle that recognizes motivational diversity.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host, Jeremy D'Souza, and today we have quite an interesting guest with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our amazing guest, allow me to quickly introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform, available across 14 channels with more than 30,000 bots spread across 186 countries in pretty much every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, TechWorld, CIO, Good Firms, and many others. We run the Engati blog, the video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our wonderful guest. Look, Jameson is the CEO and the founder of Playfulli. He was named in top 25 CX influencers of 2019 by Panviva. Top 50 thought leaders for design thinking and future of work by Thinkers 360, and the top 20 gamification gurus by Rise Global. He's been featured in numerous publications, including the Wall Street Journal, for his thoughts on employee engagement, motivation, and purpose. His approaches have attracted many coveted awards, and his enthusiasm for CX and EX has helped shape some of Australia's largest organizations' customer and employee experience programs. Luke, we're really, really thrilled to have you with us on the show today.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Yeah, thrilled to be here.
Okay. Luke, my first question to you is, over the past few years, we've seen companies add game-like features to their products to enhance their customer experience. How does it boost customer engagement?
Great question. So it really depends on how they've designed that particular piece. So gamification is essentially adding game mechanics to non-game activities to try and drive certain behaviors. Now, those behaviors are either to be like something or to avoid something. So there's this sort of gain and loss mentality. And it's kind of stemmed from the very beginning of humanity, really. We in our brains are designed to either want something more and look for safety and find the right food and find shelter and socialize with other people. It's all these feelings of gain. It's like when we eat donuts, we get this feeling of, and this dopamine hit, and we want to eat more donuts. In order to enhance someone's experience, it's a really great way of applying gamification. When it's applied just to get more use of your product and almost this manipulation of someone, that's where it can be really, really poorly executed. And the challenge with doing it that way is that people then have the negative experience of feeling manipulated or feeling used, or it's poorly implemented, and it doesn't have meaning. So, for example, they might add a series of badges to a product. And I know Facebook did this recently. They added badges and gamification to their platform. And some of the badges that you received were just so ridiculous. Like it was like congratulations, you posted something. And it's like, well, of course I posted something. This is what the platform's about. And so it had no meaning. And it ends up just feeling condescending and has the total opposite effect of what they intended. But there's plenty of game mechanics that want you to keep using the product. And we see plenty of things like streaks applied to products. I've got a couple of daughters and they are forever going on about their Snapchat streaks, that they don't want to lose their Snapchat streak. So they're forever trying to log on.
On about his Duolingo streak.
Exactly. And I'm a big Duolingo fan. I got to like 400 and something days of straight. And then I went on, I think it was 420 odd days of streaks. So yeah, it can be a very powerful incentive and great motivator. And the thing about gamification is that it's about continual motivation.
Yeah.
So motivation, if we just look at things like standard incentives, so hey, we're going to a competition this week. It becomes a short-term incentive, and at the end of that, you're either really stoked or really demotivated by the outcome, and it's only short-term. Good gamification is ongoing and continually motivates somebody, and motivates someone really to have continuous progress. And that's I think the most important thing, because continuous progress makes you want to keep going. If you just motivate someone for a short period of time and that ends, it's almost restarting and you lose that momentum.
You got to make them feel like they're leveling up continuously.
Yeah, that's right. Leveling up is definitely one part, but how you level up is also really important. So the intensity and the challenge should also get more difficult as you level up, and because after once you level up one level, you then are slightly more invested, so you spend more time and more effort, and therefore you want to then on the next level make it a little bit more effort. And there's this feeling of empowerment and ownership, and growth and learning. And learning is such a big key part to good gamification. You have to have learning, which is why I like seeing things like micro learning, gamification, such as Duolingo, and there's some other great platforms out there, gamification platforms that have micro learning built into them.
Sounds pretty interesting. Luke, what do you think is the best way to gamify the customer experience as a whole?
Yeah, that's a big question. So the first thing is why? Like, why do you want to gamify a customer experience? That's always a really important question to ask yourself, because why you want to do it will determine which game mechanics you start to implement. It'll also influence the design around how you go about doing that. And what is it that you're wanting to create? Is it it might be something very simple, like just more engagement, or something more complex, which is return users, or a social network, or this like an ongoing feeling of wanting of investment and loyalty. So there's a whole heap of reasons why you would gamify something, and that's really going to determine which game mechanics you use. So the best approach, I believe, in starting to gamify something is understand what it is you want to achieve, then find out what are the behaviors that are underlying all of that. So once you start to look at the behaviors and not the metrics, so the lag metrics, you actually start to rethink how someone interacts with you. And I'll give you an example. If sales is your metric and just getting sales, then you're only going to try and gamify that outcome. And the only way someone can win is to buy something. And the only reason they would buy something is to potentially get level up in a game. And that can feel pretty empty pretty quickly. Whereas we all know the buying process is a emotional investment, and it's something that we have a whole heap of behaviors that we do before we get to the actual sale. And so you might actually then think, well, how do we gamify those behaviors? How do we incentivize those behaviors and reward those behaviors that end up leading us to a sale? And how do we want someone to feel? And if they want to, if the end of it is we want them to feel like they made the right decision, they're happy with the brand, there's no buyer's remorse, they had a great experience throughout the whole process, they learned something, and then they become an advocate for the product. If that's what we want, then what are the behaviors that we want to start to incentivize? And some of those things might be around our social sharing, how we promote that product, and it also might just be about how we interact with that product initially. It might not be to get the sale, but just to get brand awareness and to have repeat visits to our website and all those sort of things.
Sounds pretty interesting. Luke, with digital transformation getting so much focus right now, will we see any significant advances in the adoption and use of gamification?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been doing gamification for over a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started, I don't even know if I called it gamification. It was, we were cutting up paper and putting it up on walls and creating games and dynamics that rewarded diversity and people's behaviors. And it wasn't until maybe about 5 years ago that platforms really started to hit the market in a big way. And we're seeing that translate now into a digital space. And it's been an interesting journey seeing these platforms come onto the market, because initially it was just, how do we gamify sales, or how do we gamify these lag metrics? And what we're seeing is the companies that are doing really well and evolving really around using behavioral science and gamification and marrying those together. And when behavioral science and gamification come together and mix in nicely with someone's metrics and behaviors, we start to see great advancement. And obviously with digital, it's becoming much easier to track a lot of these behaviors. So knowledge management's a great space where we see things like we want to improve someone's quality in their work. We know that people who read their knowledge management they're going to be higher in quality, more efficient, and likely to give feedback. So we incentivize those things. And now, because we've got a digital platform, we can link these two pieces together. I think with the other advancements, we're going to see as more and more things digitize and become cheaper, things like voice analytics, we're going to start seeing a lot of crossover in those spaces as well.
Mm-hmm. Sounds pretty interesting. Speaking of voice analytics, and it'll probably tie into conversational AI and all that stuff. How do you think AI and conversational automation could actually help with gamification?
Well, look, I've seen this firsthand. Mm-hmm. Gamification and AI is a very powerful tool. And as I said before, good gamification involves learning. It's all about, self-development. Yeah. And it's too easy, I think, to take a blanket approach to everybody and say that we all have to learn the same thing at the same pace and that we're all the same. We're all different. You and I are going to be motivated differently. We're going to be, I might be more motivated by the social interactions at work. You might be more interested in the leaderboards, and somebody else might be more interested and motivated by deep learning, and we're all motivated slightly differently.
Absolutely.
So when we have this AI in the background, it actually starts to learn our behaviors and then starts to deliver content to us in a way that is engaging and meaningful for ourselves. And I'll give you an example. One of the platforms I work with, Centrical, they have AI in the background that every week, all the quizzes that they do, it starts to analyze and work out where they have answered strong and where they need, continual improvement. And it will sum up a questionnaire at the end of the week that is really focused to that individual, and then apply game mechanics to try and get that person to engage and learn on the things that they need to work on. And so it's using all of this data to then deliver this quiz. And that quiz might be very different that I get compared to what you might get, because we have different strengths.
Yeah, so now we see hyper-personalized gamification because of that, right?
Exactly. But then we can go a step further, and then we can actually see that you and I, we would actually be a great team together because we have opposite strengths and weaknesses. And if we team up and work together against another team, then we not only help each other, but we're now helping move the dial in our organization and all that sort of stuff. I think the other place we're going to see gamification really come into play is around voice analytics. Voice analytics is getting cheaper, and storage of that data is, much more digestible these days. I think back sort of maybe even 5 years ago, the cost of implementing a voice analytics program was astronomical. But now we see things like Amazon come into the market with their voice analytics, and data storage is cheap, the recording of it's cheap, the transcription of it is really cost effective. And when we combine that data, so that voice to text, and overlay that with sentiment, our conversations are always going to be behavioral. And so when you start overlaying behavioral data and gamification, that's where we can see some really powerful changes. So I think that's a space to watch in gamification for sure.
Hey, we're definitely going to be seeing some very intriguing advances over there. Do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Look, I think gamification has sort of a mixed reaction to for many people. It can be very polarizing. I think some people think one of three things. They either think this has got something to do with video games, which it really doesn't. It's sort of had it's kind of rooted in video games. Video games do a great job of working out user design and how we engage and trying to engage people more. Gamification definitely stemmed from that. We said, people were like, okay, well, if we're getting such great engagement in a game, how do we then apply that to non-games? So I think that, that's one thought. I think the second thought is this is just a gimmick and just to get blood out of a stone and more out of less, and can be manipulative, and that's a challenge. And then I think the third one is people are either they're just intrigued and want to understand more. So I think gamification still has a way to go to become mainstream. I think there's I think when I speak to people and speak to clients, there's always this aha moment when they realize that gamification and behavioral design have a really close link to each other. When people start to see that link and see the maturity of those two products, those two concepts combined, I think that's when you'll start getting bigger engagement, particularly from like that C-level executives in organizations. When you start to talk to them about happiness of an employee, engagement of an employee, lower attrition, lower recruitment costs, higher performance, more meaning, they become advocates for your job, then it becomes a no-brainer. But I think that the industry is still sort of getting there, around gamification as a legitimate way of moving forward, and a legitimate way of measuring people. I think the challenge comes from we've always done things the same way. We get a metric from our CEO or the board, and then that gets rolled down to the executive, and then that gets divided up into the managers, and then they roll it out to the front line, and we just break this big piece down into micro pieces of work that everyone has to do. And we all do it because we need a job, but none of it, a lot of us are not engaged by that. None of it, when we look at the figures of the last 10 years, the figures of surveys that have come out from Gallup and Gartner and Fifth Quadrant, this same figure keeps coming up, that only 25% of us are actually engaged. Yep. And when we look at traditional KPIs, so hit X number of sales, hit X number of widgets, whatever it is that you have to produce, get this high in quality, this high in experience, net promoter score, whatever it is, they're these binary metrics. And the challenge that comes with that is that it's only motivating 25% of our workforce because they're motivated by the leaderboard or the target. That we have people that are motivated by and social interaction. We've got people who are motivated by exploring deeply a subject and becoming subject matter experts. We have people who are driven by team goals and accomplishing things themselves and self-development. Yeah. And because we exclude them from these binary targets, which make up about 75% of our workforce, we end up with this figure. So I think the reason I like gamification is not because of the fun that it's meant to deliver. I think fun is a concept that we all, it's different for every person. The reason I like gamification is because it is a great vehicle that recognizes motivational diversity. And when we start to think about motivational diversity in a behaviors perspective and being inclusive of everybody and not just 25%, that's where I think it's extremely powerful.
Yep, it'll certainly be helping us to increase motivation and efficiency from the entire organization. Okay, Luke, where can people reach out to you?
Sure. Look, you can check me out on my website, which is playfulli.com, and it's PLAYFULLI.com, or Twitter at Gamify Luke, or look me up on LinkedIn.
Okay. Guys, I know you're going to be reaching out to Luke for sure. So yeah, follow him on Twitter, reach out to him, connect with him on LinkedIn, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button on this video. Engati CX will be back with a new episode and a new expert really soon. Stay tuned, guys. We'll see you around.